People say your gut is never wrong. Mine whispered the moment I stepped into that house. But I smiled anyway. My name is Rain Walters. And this story? It starts with a dinner, and ends with something no one at that table saw coming. Julio, my husband, is a quiet man. Kind. Steady. The type of guy who listens more than he talks, and when he does speak, it's worth hearing. We'd only been married 6 months. Still new enough to hold hands under the table, still figuring each other out. That night, we were having dinner at his mother's house. Samara Brock. Elegant. Polished. Cold. She had one of those smiles that never touched her eyes. The kind of woman who could cut you down with a compliment. I'd met her once before, briefly. But this was the full show. A formal sit-down dinner. Crystal glasses. Cloth napkins folded like swans. One of those setups where the forks feel heavier than the food. I could feel eyes on me from the second I walked in. Every cousin. Every aunt. Every carefully dressed guest who'd probably been told something about me before I ever arrived. Harmony Gould, Julio's cousin, leaned over to me just before we sat down. She smiled, a real smile, and whispered, "Be careful with her. She's not what she pretends to be." I almost asked her what she meant, but the way she said it? Like it was a warning wrapped in silk. I knew better than to press. I just nodded and sat down. Julio squeezed my hand under the table. I held onto it like an anchor. Across the table, Samara raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. "And to women who earn love they didn't expect." Everyone laughed. Not loud. Just soft enough to keep things nice. But I heard the sting behind her words. I met her eyes. And smiled back. The meal began, wine poured, plates passed. And then, that moment. It happened so fast, I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking right at her. Samara's hand dipped under the table. Her fingers moved quickly, too quickly to be casual. And then, a flick. Something dropped into my glass. Tiny. Silent. Almost invisible. But I saw it. And I didn't blink. Would you have said something? Or would you have waited, just like I did, to show her I wasn't the one to play with? Because if you've ever had someone smile while plotting against you, you know there's no satisfaction like letting them think they've won, right before you flip the game. So tell me, what would you have done at that table? Drop your answer in the comments, and hit subscribe, because this story? It's just getting started. You ever been in a room where everyone's smiling, but you can feel the hate sliding under the table like cold air? That's what the rest of that dinner felt like. The room was full of polished voices and porcelain plates. Clinking glasses. Laughter that felt a little too rehearsed. Compliments that weren't really compliments. "Oh Rain, your dress is so daring. You must be adjusting to our kind of people. You and Julio must be an interesting match." And there was Samara. Always watching me. Her eyes didn't move much. But when they did, they landed on my glass. Then back to my face. She was waiting for something. A slip. A cough. A tremble. But I didn't give her that. I didn't touch the glass. Not once. Instead, I waited. Jury Ferguson, Julio's younger sister, leaned over. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes? Sharp. "You okay, Rain? You've barely touched your wine." I gave her the softest smile I could muster. "Just pacing myself." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't sure what to make of me. Jury was different from the rest, too smart to pretend she didn't notice the tension, but too loyal to speak on it. Still, she was watching. Just like I was. Then came the toast. Samara stood again, glass in hand. Her pearls caught the light. Her voice, smooth as buttercream. To the strength of family. And the wisdom to protect what we've built. Everyone lifted their glasses. Julio beside me. Belle Carpenter across the table. Blaine Newman with his usual smirk. And me? I reached for the glass that wasn't mine anymore. See, right before Samara raised hers. I made the switch. It took half a second. She'd placed the glasses too close together. That was her first mistake. And she thought I wasn't watching. That was her second. I slid my untouched glass toward the edge of the table. And gently pulled Miguel Tang's toward me, the one Samara had likely poured with nothing in it. Then I offered mine, the one she spiked, to Miguel as he laughed at something Oakland Zamora said. Cheers, I whispered to him, nudging it forward. Miguel smiled, unsuspecting. Lifted it. Drank half in one gulp. Samara caught the motion. Her eyes froze on me. I smiled, not too much. Just enough. She lowered her glass slowly, still smiling for the crowd, but now her hand was trembling. And I finally took a small sip from the clean glass. Just a touch to keep it real. Julio squeezed my hand under the table again. He thought I was nervous. If only he knew. Miguel chuckled, his voice a bit hoarse now. That wine is strong tonight. Then he went back to talking to Jeremy Robertson like nothing happened. That's when my phone buzzed in my lap. A message from Harmony, who sat across from me texting under the tablecloth like a pro. She's trying something. Watch your back. I looked up. Harmony wasn't looking at me, she was cutting her steak, but I saw the flick of her eyes towards Samara. She knew. Somehow, she knew. My heart should have been racing. My hands should have been shaking. But they weren't. And I wasn't scared. I felt something else. Control. She tried to play chess with me, and I had just moved her king straight into checkmate. Rain, voiceover. I didn't feel safe. But I didn't feel scared either. I felt something else. Power. And as the fake laughter rolled around the table, and Miguel took another sip, I realized something. This wasn't just about dislike. Or power. Or pride. This woman wanted me gone. And I had just proven to myself. I wasn't going anywhere. Miguel took another sip. That second one, it hit harder. He chuckled at something that wasn't even funny. Then leaned too far back in his chair, caught himself just before tipping over. A fork clattered to the floor. Everyone turned. Belle Carpenter, Samara's ever-perfect cousin, leaned forward. Her brows pinched with concern. Is he okay? Samara smiled, but not the warm kind. The kind people wear when everything's falling apart and they're still trying to hold the edges together. He's fine, she said quickly. Just a long day at work. The firm's been busy. Miguel wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Phew, he muttered. This wine hits different tonight. Then he let out this odd laugh. Loud. Offbeat. Like a kid who didn't get the joke but laughed anyway to blend in. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Samara, on the other hand? Her knuckles turned white where she gripped her glass. Julio leaned in to whisper, he probably skipped lunch again. That man lives off coffee and air. But his voice was low. Uneasy. Blaine Newman, Julio's brother-in-law, turned to me with his usual smug half-grin. You good, Rain? You've been quiet. I nodded. Just watching. That's all. I could feel the tension tightening like thread under my skin. But here's the thing about quiet women at loud tables, they catch everything. And I'd caught enough. The room was still smiling, still sipping, still clinking glasses and dabbing mouths with napkins. But underneath? Cracks were forming. And Samara? She was cracking fastest. Her eyes kept darting to Miguel. He coughed now. Not loud, but strange. A dry, low sound that didn't seem to clear anything. She leaned toward him and asked something under her breath. He just blinked at her. Confused. I watched her reach under the table, maybe checking for the bottle, maybe something else. But it was too late. Because I already knew. Whatever she thought would happen to me. It was happening to him now. Then something happened inside me. Like a switch flipping. And I remembered. Back when Julio and I were still dating, Samara always found ways to cut me. Not with words, not directly. But with looks. With invitations that never came. With smiles that meant nothing. I'd walk into a room and she'd greet me with, "Oh. That's what you're wearing?" Or, "Belle used to wear dresses like that. But she filled them better." Belle. The one she really wanted Julio to end up with. The daughter of a judge. Old money. Educated in places I could never afford. One night, after a gala, Julio told me Samara once pulled him aside and said, "Be careful who you build a life with. Not everyone's made to carry the family name." He never told her off. Not then. He was still trying to keep the peace. But I remembered every word. And now? She was watching her plan backfire, live and in color. Miguel rubbed his temples and leaned into his hand. Jeremy Robertson, longtime family friend, stood up. "I think someone should drive Miguel to urgent care," he said. "Just in case. He doesn't look great." That's when I spoke. Calm. Cool. All eyes on me. "He'll be fine," I said softly. "Maybe he just needs a nap. Or maybe the wine just hit him faster tonight." Samara's head snapped toward me. For a second, just a second, I saw it in her face. Panic. That's when I met her eyes. No fear. No flinching. Just silence between us as thick, electric, and loud as a scream. And she knew. She knew that I knew. She watched me watch her, and she didn't have the words to undo what had already been done. And I didn't have to say a word. Because the silence between two women who both know the truth? It's louder than 1,000 accusations. And in that silence, I won. The dinner didn't end, it just fizzled out. Conversations thinned. Forks stopped moving. The glow around the table dimmed, like someone turned the volume down on the whole room. Miguel sat slumped in his chair, holding a cloth napkin to his forehead while everyone pretended not to stare. Samara kept up the act, pouring water, dabbing his neck, whispering too softly for anyone to hear. Julio tried to steer the mood back, telling a story about work, laughing too loud, but even he could feel it slipping. And me? I didn't say a word. I helped stack a few plates, nodded through small talk, and kept my eyes off Samara, because I already knew she was watching me. Trying to figure out how I'd flipped the table without ever touching a thing. And then came Oakland Zamora. Julio's cousin. Always curious, always close to the fire but never burned by it. She followed me into the kitchen while I rinsed glasses at the sink. Her voice was soft, but her words were sharp. "Did something happen?" I looked up at her, just long enough for her to feel the weight of what she was asking. Then I smiled. Nothing I didn't see coming. She blinked, and I could see it land. She didn't know what I meant exactly, but she knew enough not to ask twice. By the time dessert hit the table, no one was hungry. Belle faked a phone call. Jury helped Miguel to the car. Samara walked beside them like nothing had happened, her heels clicking hard against the tile. That sound, those heels, it stayed in my ears long after they were gone. Julio sat beside his stepfather's hospital bed, staring at the monitor. Miguel was out cold. Monitors blinking. Drip bag full. The doctors had said observation overnight, but their faces said more than their words. Some kind of sedative, one had muttered. We'll need to do a talk screen. I stood in the doorway for a while before saying anything. Julio looked tired. Confused. Like he was trying to fix a puzzle with half the pieces missing. I walked in slowly. Quiet. He asked, "You think it was something he ate?" I sat beside him and placed my hand over his. No. Not something he ate. I paused. Something he drank. Out of my glass. He turned to me slowly. What? I nodded. I saw her do it, Julio. At dinner. She dropped something in my drink. Julio stared at me, eyes wide, jaw clenched. And you didn't say anything? I wanted proof. Now we have it. He looked back at Miguel, then stood up. Fast. Too fast. He didn't say another word. Just walked out of the room. Round pushpin, the next morning, no calls from Julio. No texts. But I didn't need a reply to know how deep the knife had gone. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Voicemail. It was Quentin Barnett, the family attorney. Velvet voice. The guy who always showed up when the family made mistakes and needed someone to clean it up. Rain, hey. Quentin here. Look, I know last night got tense. Miguel's doing better, that's the good news. As for the rest, well, sometimes misunderstandings happen in families. Samara asked me to reach out, see if we could maybe meet. No pressure. Just a chat to smooth things over. Smooth. That word. Like everything could just be ironed out and swept away. I deleted the message without replying. Later that night, another text. This time from the source. Samara Brock, you don't understand what you've done. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it scared me. But because it made me laugh. She still thought I'd lost something. That I had something to regret. So I replied, calm and clean, Rain, neither do you. And I meant it. Because what she thought was power? That poison, that trick? That wasn't power. Power is knowing when to speak, and when to let someone drink from their own glass. 1 week later, my house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. Jazz played low through the speakers. The good plates were out. Napkins folded clean and simple. No swans this time, just comfort. There was laughter. Real laughter. The kind that fills a room and doesn't ask permission to stay. This dinner was mine. Only those who had stood beside me were invited. Harmony. Jury. Oakland. Even Miguel, still a bit wobbly, but sitting tall at the table, with a soft blanket draped around his shoulders and his appetite slowly coming back. Julio sat next to me. Quiet, still nursing the shock of it all, but more present than ever. He hadn't spoken to his mother since the night at the hospital. Not once. Belle wasn't here. Samara wasn't either. The seat where she would have sat remained empty on purpose. And yet, she still filled the room. You could feel her name hovering like smoke near the ceiling, like everyone knew not to say it out loud. Not tonight. I served the food with a full heart. And I watched everyone eat without looking over their shoulders. Harmony raised her glass halfway through the meal, her eyes bright with that wild little spark she always had. To women who don't flinch, she said. And who don't drink what they're handed. The room fell quiet, then broke into knowing laughter. A few claps. Even Miguel chuckled, soft and dry. I looked at Julio. He looked back. He hadn't said much in the days since. But his silence wasn't cold, it was heavy. Like he was holding something in place. Like the weight of family had finally shifted, and he didn't know yet how to stand without it. But he held my hand under the table. And that was enough. Round pushpin, later that night, alone in the kitchen. Everyone had left. The dishes were clean. Candles burned low. I walked into the kitchen slowly, barefoot on cool tile, wrapping my cardigan tight. The house was quiet again. But not empty. And that's when I opened the cabinet. The one above the stove. The one where I'd hidden the thing I found, after dinner, after everyone had left that first night at Samara's. She must have dropped it too fast. Too careless. Or maybe she thought I'd never find it. But I did. It was a small bottle. Clear. The label had been peeled off. But it was still half full. I held it up to the light. Watched the way it caught the gold glow from the under-cabinet bulb. My thumb ran along the edge. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought about keeping it. As proof. As protection. As a trophy. But then I thought about something else. About how power doesn't live in what you hide, it lives in what you choose to let go of. So I walked over to the trash, opened the lid, and dropped it in. No drama. No music swelling. Just a soft clink. And a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I stood there for a while. Looking out the window. Watching the lights from Harmony's car fade into the distance. And I thought about Samara. About her silence. She hadn't texted again. Hadn't called. And maybe she wouldn't. Maybe that was her punishment, having to live with the fact that I saw her for exactly who she was, and still didn't flinch. She thought poison was power. She thought control came in a bottle. She thought silence meant weakness. But sometimes, real power is knowing when to let someone drink from their own glass. And walk away without ever raising yours. If you've ever been underestimated, tell me in the comments. And if you've ever stayed silent just long enough to let someone expose themselves. Hit subscribe. Because your story deserves to be told too.